Hello and welcome to Shoot the Hostage with me, Dan, and my partner, Sarah. We're a movie podcast who talks about a different film each week based on a theme. We do swear and we do spoil the featured movie, so only ever listen if you've seen the film or you don't care too much about spoilers. If you're a regular listener, you can just skip forward until you hear the intro music because you've heard all of this before. But if you are new to the show and you do enjoy what you hear, there are a couple of things you can do to help support the show. Firstly, make sure that you're subscribed on your podcast player so you get notified when new shows drop on Mondays. You could rate us 5 stars on Spotify, which couldn't be easier. You just hit the star icon below the show's artwork. Or if you have a spare few minutes, we'd love it if you could submit a review wherever you listen. Make sure you come follow us at STH_pod on social media. We are active on Instagram, X, Threads, and TikTok. And lastly, the biggest thing you can do to help is tell a friend about the show. So that's about it. That's enough preamble from me. Over to me and Sarah for this week's episode. Okay, welcome back to another episode. It's the penultimate episode in our neo-western season, and we're talking about The Warriors, 1979.
Dan.
Sarah.
Can you dig it?
I knew you was going to open with that.
I love this movie. I love this movie so much. And I'm thrilled that you chose it.
You know, last season when you threw me a bone by choosing the Green Knight. I was going to say the Dark Knight, but it was the Green Knight. It's different.
Different night.
Yeah. There was another film that I was considering for this spot, which we might talk about. But I decided to go with this one, parking the neo-western thing aside for one moment, because again, it's not neo-western. I thought I'd throw you a bone because I know that you love this movie, and I thought it might be fun to talk about. So 1979.
Yes.
Good year for movies.
What else came out in 79?
Oh, there's a little movie called, you might have heard of it, called Alien.
Alien.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to say Alien. Wasn't Walter Hill involved in that? Was he a producer or something?
Yes, he was. And doing a bit of research, it turns out that he was quite instrumental in it getting made. Was handed a script. It was like, the script's a bit shit, but the premise was the premise was so good with the chest burster stuff. And then he basically got it made. So huge credit, which I had no idea about because Walter Hill is not someone that was hugely on my radar. But yeah, instrumental in Alien.
So 1979, good year for movies, but also really good year for Walter Hill.
Really good year,
Specifically.
Yeah. Well, yes, good year because of Alien, but I don't think The Warriors... Oh, actually, yeah, I think it did okay. Budget of 4 million, box office 23 million, so it did okay.
It was supposed to do better. I have a fact for you straight out of the gate.
All right.
So because of the content of the film and the marketing of the film and it being about gangs and gang violence, it did really well initially, and they thought it was going to be kind of a runaway hit. But then there were incidences of actual gang violence at screenings.
Right.
So Paramount apparently panicked and pulled it from a bunch of theatres. Okay. So it didn't get the run that it should have done.
Right, okay. So good then, really, considering it had a very limited amount of screen time or release. That's pretty good, really. And
yeah, pretty impressive.
Has gone on to be a cult classic, you could describe it as?
I would definitely call it a cult classic. Yeah, I don't think... It's funny. I don't think like the average person would necessarily have seen this film. But I feel like almost everybody who's into films has seen this film.
Right, okay. Well, it's a little bit like last week when we spoke about Near Dark. You introduced me to Near Dark. I hadn't seen that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd also never seen The Warriors until you showed me it about 2 years ago, I want to say.
2-3 years, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not something I was ever hugely interested in. I think I was aware of some of the imagery, but was never really that keen to watch it. I never did. But now I've seen it twice.
Yeah, and then I made you watch it and you're still not that keen. Or are you? Has your opinion changed?
we'll get into that.
Okay.
So we mentioned Walter Hill already,
Mm-hmm.
and I did mention that he's not ever someone that was on my radar. Pretty well-known director. Started off making documentaries. I think he was a researcher, wrote a few scripts on the side, did some second AD work in the 60s on films like Bullet and the Thomas Crown Affair, so a couple of Steve McQueen joints. And then was off to the races in the 70s making movies. Now, I think I'm looking at his credits now, and for me, the driver is probably the one that is my favourite out of his movies.
Yeah, which is a film of his that I hadn't seen until you introduced me to it.
Yeah, not that long ago, actually.
Yeah.
I would say The Driver is probably my favourite, but I'm quite partial to a Brewster's Millions as well. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I do enjoy me some Brewster's Millions. What?
I always forget that's him.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't feel like a Walter Hill movie.
It doesn't.
I did watch Red Heat a few weeks ago, and that also feels like an odd one. I don't love that movie. I think it's one of the weaker Arnold movies. And also 48 Hours, which a lot of people have a lot of time for. I think I've seen it once when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Didn't make a huge impact on me and sort of never revisited it. But maybe that's due a rewatch. But aside from those, he's not a filmmaker that's been hugely on my radar. And The Driver is definitely, for me, towers above everything else that he's ever made.
Okay.
How familiar are you with Walter Hill? Hazard a guess, this might be your favourite Walter Hill movie?
Oh, by a country mile. Absolutely. I feel like I keep saying this on the podcast, and there's only a handful more times I can say this without sounding like a liar. But this, again, is another film that's in my top 10 of all time.
Yeah, you've got a lot of movies in your top 10.
Yeah. There's only a finite number of times I can say that. Yeah, I don't know. He's not, outside of The Warriors, he's not a filmmaker I know a drastic amount about. Like I say, had never even seen The Driver until maybe a few months back.
Yeah.
When we watched it together. Because I know you'd mentioned it a number of times in the context of it having been really influential to films like Drive.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
So I was interested, but not kind of, oh, I must go out and watch everything else that this guy's directed. For me, much like you with The Driver, The Warriors is head and shoulders above everything else of his that I've seen.
Okay. That's really interesting to me. I mean, when did you first see it? Is this something that you saw at a young age, or you came to later?
Youngish. I was a teenager.
And how did that come about? Was this a video store rental? Were your parents a fan of it, or
no? God, no. You're kidding.
That was a loaded question.
You think Susan's watching The Warriors?
I don't know. How did it get on your radar?
I think it was probably something that I watched at a friend's house. I don't remember the exact circumstances, but I definitely watched it in my teens, and it was either, I don't know, an ex-boyfriend or a friend who had it, and I watched it over their house, and immediately was won over. And I would say the number of times, like, I've watched this film a lot since, and I like it more every time, if that's even possible.
Okay.
And I struggle to articulate why, but I am going to attempt to in the next hour or so.
Well, I was going to say, that's kind of why we're here. We need to articulate our reasons for liking it or disliking it, or just have some general thoughts on it.
Or maybe a domestic towards the end.
Possibly. So you came to it pretty young in life. It's maybe one of those, and I feel I say this quite a lot on the podcast, that maybe I might have more fondness of it if I had seen it at a younger age. I feel like it's probably something that my dad would have enjoyed, and if I'd sat down and watched it with him, perhaps I would have more fondness for it. But I think because I came to it later in life and I just kind of wasn't interested in it, I was, it's okay. There's some good stuff in it, which we'll get into. But I think overall, I find it a bit of a weird experience. And I've been thinking about it a lot more this time because obviously we have to articulate our thoughts on it. I think the first time I saw it, I was kind of like, it's okay.
I know. I was blown away. I was just how are you underwhelmed? This is amazing.
It was a bit lost on me, I think. But I think part of that is because I didn't see it until I was in my late 30s and was just kind of like, I don't quite get everyone's love for this movie. Although there are things in it to appreciate, and I think it's well directed and there's some good stuff.
No, you're so charitable. There's some good stuff, I guess.
Yeah, some good stuff, I guess. That's my thoughts. Anyway, next week.
I understand why you feel that way. I do, because watching it, I sort of did the opposite to you. Because I have seen this so many times and I view it very fondly. I think, I don't know, I maybe tried to view it a little bit more objectively this time around.
Yeah.
And watching it as, trying to view it as something of an outsider, all of the separate elements of this film shouldn't work. A lot of it is odd and cringe and just a bit weird and camp almost. But it's like lightning in a bottle for me. It all comes together in this really cohesive way, and it's so fucking cool. I don't understand how all of these separate elements that would be embarrassing in isolation come together to be so cool. I don't get it, but they do, for me anyway.
I don't think this is cool. I think this is...
Okay.
I don't think this is cool in the slightest. I think it's trying to be cool, and in that, it's not, if that makes sense. It feels a bit try-hard to me.
It makes sense. What you're saying makes sense, but your opinion doesn't make sense to me.
My opinion's wrong. It's not as good as Brewster's Millions, is what I'm saying.
Oh, how dare you.
This is based on book.
It is. It's based on a book by Sol Uric, which I've also read.
Have you?
Yeah.
Is book good?
10 years ago. Yeah, it's good. It's very different to the film.
Okay.
Very different. I mean, the very bare bones of the story is the same. It's about a gang, although in the book they're all teenagers, which I guess kind of makes, like, some of the stuff that happens in the film kind of makes sense in that context, because some of what they do and their bravado and the over the top kind of machismo is a bit teenage boy, if that makes sense.
It feels like a bunch of 13-year-old boys have all gone to the magic machine in Big and put a coin in it and wish they were big. And then now that they're big, they're like, right, let's all put on waistcoats and pretend that we're
start a gang.
Double-eyed bastards. Yeah. And 1,000 people have done that. No, how many is it? It's like 20,000 or something. 20,000 gang members in the entire, I was going to say universe, but in New York City.
Just in New York City, yeah.
So Walter Hill also, along with David Shaber, who also worked on The Driver, I think they adapted the novel, and director of photography Andrew Laszlo, First Blood, and I've got to mention this because he worked on a Martin Short movie, Inner Space.
You have to mention it.
Yeah, I do. And in a new section, well, I'm going to make a point of mentioning who the production accountant is on every movie. The production accountant was Sam Bernstein, and unfortunately Sam Bernstein is no longer with us, but their last credit was as an auditor for the Street Fighter movie.
Oh, wow.
I don't think I've ever seen an auditor credit on a movie, or I've never noticed it before, so I can only imagine that the auditor had to work on Street Fighter for a long, long time.
Was it? Are we talking an auditor as in the literal sense, or in the Bob Odenkirk in Nobody sense? Because that one would be way cooler.
The type of auditor that sends someone to Belize.
Yeah.
No, an auditor in the sense that someone that has to come in and check all the paperwork and make sure that everything's done correctly. Basically, it's the thing that us people that work in production accounting always say to the crew, we need to get the paperwork right for the audit.
Right.
That's sort of a throwaway excuse. But it's true because...
Is auditing a Scientology thing as well?
Yeah, I believe it is, yeah.
What a fantastic word. So many different uses.
Yeah, you could apply it to many things, really. You can audit anything when you think about it.
It's so versatile.
Yeah. Yeah. So cast-wise then, there's a couple of... I mean, I only am really aware of James Remar and David Patrick Kelly that are in this.
Yeah, they're the two who went on to have the more well-known careers, I guess.
Yeah. So we've got Michael Beck, who plays Swan, James Remar, who we've mentioned as Ajax, who's named after a cleaning product, David Patrick Kelly.
No, he's named after, like, isn't it a Greek god?
Yes. Oh, so the Greek god was named after a cleaning product.
Yeah, and also a town in Toronto.
Okay. Yes, David Patrick Kelly as Luther, Deborah Van Valkenburg as Mercy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, James Remar, was he in Dexter? You watched that show, didn't you?
I did, yes. He was Dexter's dad.
Oh, he was Papa Dexter.
In the flashbacks.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not...
Yeah, he was pretty good.
I saw in his credits that he was in Oppenheimer, but there was 1,000 people in that movie, so I don't remember which person he played.
Everybody was in Oppenheimer. Every white male in America was in Oppenheimer.
Yeah. Even David Krumholtz was in Oppenheimer. Michael Beck, I haven't seen in anything else, I don't think.
So he's had a weird career. He's not done a great deal. It's really unfortunate because in an interview he actually kind of said that he was cast as much of a lead as there is in The Warriors. I mean, it's very much an ensemble piece, but I'd
call him the lead.
Yeah, he's kind of the lead. So he got this role, and he's, in his own words, he said that The Warriors opened a lot of doors for him in the industry. And then a year later, he was in Xanadu, and he said Xanadu closed all of those doors.
Okay.
So
I've never even heard of Xanadu.
You've never heard of... Oh my God. It's very famous in terms of it being terrible. Just an absolute misfire on all cylinders and a total flop. It's kind of like a semi-musical on roller skates with Olivia Newton-John. Oh yeah, terrible. There's a whole Xanadu song. Like, oh, you'd hate it.
Oh, when you said the name Xanadu, I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And then you said the word musical and Olivia Newton-John. I was like, no.
All of your interest evaporated.
Did the opposite of peaking, whatever what the word is for that.
Okay.
So which version did you watch?
I watched the one without the comic book transitions and the wipes, which is my preferred version.
Okay. Did you watch it on Now TV?
I did.
I know you did, because when I went to put it on last night and it said, would you like to watch this again? And I was like, I haven't watched this before. But
in fairness, when I went to it, it also said, do you want to watch this again? So I think we must have watched it together on there at some point.
Right. Yeah, the first time we watched it together, we must have watched it on there. Okay, fair enough.
But I asked you yesterday afternoon which version are you going to watch, and you said the one on Now TV. So I wanted to make sure it was the identical version.
Oh, you see, I was thinking the opposite of that. I thought that you were asking me which version I was going to watch so that you watched the other one.
Oh. Sorry.
But I do know... That's all right, I don't care. But I do know that you're not a huge fan of the director's cut.
No.
Are you?
And I feel bad because the director's cut definitely has more ties to the novel, because in the novel one of the main characters is sort of reading a comic version of events. It's strange. There's no way to verbalize that without it sounding deeply odd, but it makes sense in the context of the book. So I understand what Walter Hill was going for, but I've never been a fan of those like wipe transitions anyway. And when you add kind of the comic book panels to sort of give the film chapters, I don't know. And there's like an opening narration and stuff. I don't feel like any of that was necessary.
Yeah.
I feel like it cheapens it a little bit and makes it as though it's for a younger audience, maybe.
Okay, I could see how that would kind of, because it's a very dark movie and there's some very dark shit that happens in this.
Yeah.
So I could see how that kind of style might not marry with the kind of the theme and what's happening in the movie.
No, I found it to be quite abrasive.
I am quite interested to see that version. I must admit, I'm not in a hurry to watch this movie again. But I'm quite interested to see that alternative version.
Okay.
What's the one that you've got on? Is it an Arrow release that you got recently?
Yeah, lovely, lovely. Region 1 Arrow Blu-ray. Yeah, it's got both.
Okay.
Both are on there, yeah.
And that's why you procured that one, isn't it? Because it had the original version, which you prefer.
Well, yeah, I mean, for some reason it's never really had a decent release in the UK, which blows my mind because as you've said, it's a huge cult favorite and
Yeah.
it just sort of smacks of being something that a company like Arrow would put out, but they've never done one in the UK for some reason, which is why I had to get the import. I don't even think it's had a Blu-ray release over here, you know.
Yeah, that's weird.
That's wild to me, yeah. And the one that was always readily available, the DVD, was the one with the comic book transitions. So yeah, as soon I mean, I like having the option. The option's always there if you want to watch that one, but I do prefer having the other version. And I don't feel like that's a controversial viewpoint. From what I've seen online, most fans of the film do seem to prefer the one without that stuff.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
from what I've seen.
Like I said, I'm kind of interested to see that version. I think you mentioned the kind of the wipe transitions earlier, which remain in the original version as well. I guess you can't really do much about that,
which I don't love. But
I don't either. The only other movie I can think of that does that to a large degree is Star Wars, and that's obviously a kids' movie. But I don't know. There's something about that kind of editing technique that removes the tension, the drama. It definitely makes it feel more kind of
artificial.
Aimed at children, more artificial. Yeah, like you want to cut to a thing to make you feel a certain way, and when you're doing that, it kind of, I don't know. It's a weird technique that I don't really care for.
Yeah, and it was a real fad around that time as well. So it just dates the film as well.
Yeah.
I mean, amongst many things that date this film.
Well, yeah, which we'll talk about, don't you worry. I will watch the director's cut at some point, I'm sure, but probably on my own, by the sound of things.
Okay. No, I'll watch it with you.
All right. So this movie is about gangs, right? It's about 1 million gangs.
Yes.
It's not set in any specific time period.
Well, so in the director's cut, which we don't get in the one that we watched, there is a little bit that sort of says sometime in the near future.
Okay.
So it is posited that it's a futuristic film.
Okay.
But you didn't know The Warriors was sci-fi.
Yeah, I guess it is, yeah.
But yeah, they don't go to any pains to sort of date it in any way. But I mean, the futuristic element would explain the costuming, shall we say?
Yeah, and that's something that I do enjoy about this movie, because I mentioned the gangs. You've got 1,000 different gangs, and they get together for this meeting. There's 1,000 people at this meeting, and you get a look at many different gangs, and I think they're all quite different. There's lots of different types of gangs, how they look, how they dress, how they act. Have you got a favourite gang?
I mean, I do like the Lizzies, but that's just sort of like the default because it's the only all-female gang.
Yeah.
The only female gang members we see at all, in fact. I've always been quite a fan of the Baseball Furies.
Oh, is that what they're called? I just wrote down Baseball Gang.
Yeah, Baseball Furies. They're probably the most well-known outside of the actual Warriors, who in the book were called the Dominators.
Okay. I think they're probably the most interesting. They seem like they're the most menacing gang. They seem to be the double artist out of all of the gangs. I do enjoy the leather daddies, or the rogues, who David Patrick Kelly works for. I find that gang quite interesting.
Yeah. in their hearse.
Yeah. What about the worst gang? Who's the worst gang? And there is a correct answer.
There is a correct answer. Oh, God. I don't love the ones who've made it their entire personality to wear dungarees.
Correct.
Is that the correct answer?
Yeah. I don't know the name of them, but I wrote down dungaree skatey boys.
Yeah. I also don't love the gang. We only see them in the meeting at the start and then never again. The ones who just wear bright purple vests and knit caps.
Oh, what's a knit cap?
It's what it sounds like, a cap, but it's been knitted.
Oh, I thought you said nip cat. Nip cap.
A nip cap?
Oh, Nick.
That's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about pasties.
I'm not a fan of the orphans. I think they're pretty vague.
Oh, it's low effort. Yeah, there's like a weird skinhead gang as well, who also wear dungarees.
I was there. I missed them.
Do you know what? Maybe the mimes are up there as well.
The mimes might be the scariest gang.
Yeah, because mimes are inherently terrifying.
Yeah.
You have to be a psychopath to do that job, I hear. It's a prerequisite.
Yeah, I think you're right.
If a gang of mimes started coming towards me, in any scenario, I would turn and run away.
If I had an option between running away from the mimes and towards the baseball gang, I'm running towards the baseball gang. Yeah, I take it back. The mimes are the scariest.
Yeah. No, I do really love the costuming in this movie, though. I think it's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. But as you say, it sort of gives all of the different gangs like a very distinct look and appeal, and it makes it very easy to distinguish one from another. And I think it gives the film a lot of character as well.
Yeah.
Like, yes, some of them are vaguely ludicrous.
Yeah.
But it does give the film just a little something extra. Although I've often wondered, like, how do you coordinate? Do they join up and they get given some sort of uniform? Is this what it means? Is this what the term organized crime means?
Well, yeah, I guess so.
Uniforms.
Yeah. Well, there was no Facebook groups back then, so I guess it was just like we meet at this place every Tuesday night at 7:30.
You must wear a silk dressing gown.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about the cast. Obviously, James Remar, and a little bit about Michael Beck, who I feel like it's kind of tragic the way his career just sort of was curtailed by
Zamboozle.
By Xanadu. Zamboozle, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if it's just me, but he had kind of a bit of a Heath Ledger quality about him.
In this movie?
Can you see that? Yeah.
I don't think he's...
Visually?
I don't think he's got... Visually, yes, I see it. He definitely doesn't have the range of Heath Ledger. From this movie, and it's difficult because I've only seen him in this one, so I can't really judge him on that. I don't know whether it's a direction or a character choice on his part. But he feels very flat. But yeah, aesthetically, I can see that.
I think the two other people that I do want to mention, what was her name? Deborah Van Valkenburg?
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking you because I know you make notes about cast and stuff.
Yes.
Mercy.
I
love her character. This film is very blokey. This film is a sausage fest, as are most of the films this season. But I don't know. I really love Mercy as a character. Yeah,
I think she's definitely maybe the most interesting character, I would say.
Do you think?
I think so. I don't find... I think a lot of the characters are distinguished, as we've mentioned already, via the costumes and like the way that the gangs are kind of coordinated. But I think outside of that, I think the characters are a little bit flat, and they have maybe one characteristic, like one has a big dick. One, you know. But I think she seems to be the most interesting. Maybe she's got the most depth. I get the feeling that she's maybe had a bit of a troubled past, and she's just kind of trying to survive. That's the kind of feeling that I get from that character.
I think it's fairly safe to say that everybody in this movie has had something of a troubled past.
Well, that's
just
true.
Going out on a limb. But yeah, I agree. I think there is a lot of depth to her character. I disagree that she's the only one, though, because I genuinely, and this might be a controversial opinion, I'm not sure, I love her relationship with Swan
Do
and how
you?
that sort of slowly develops. I do. It's problematic as hell, but I love it.
Yeah, it's toxic as fuck.
Yeah.
It's I think one of the problems that I have with this movie is that I don't really have anyone to root for. If it's anyone, it's Mercy.
Okay.
But Swan, I can't stand Swan. I think he's a prick.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I do think you are supposed to root for the Warriors. I think obviously it's a quest movie, isn't it? Where
Mm.
the quest is it's almost a video game.
Yeah,
Your mission is to get to home base. So I do think you are supposed to root for them.
yeah,
And I find it interesting that you don't, because I obviously the entire film is such a morally questionable grey area.
mm.
But I do find myself rooting for them. I can't help it. With the exception of Ajax. Ajax can go to hell.
Yeah. Ajax is awful. He's
Mm.
using the F slurs left, right, and center. There's definitely some repressed homosexuality there. I feel like I think this whole
Mhm.
movie is kind of. I mean, it's this movie's gay as fuck. Let's be honest. There's there's so
Well, what
many.
about the leather vests is gay to you, Dan?
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because there was supposed to be in the script there was a whole separate storyline where when Swan is isolated, there's obviously he's on his own for a period of time. During that time, he was supposed to have been taken by another gang who were sort of all homosexual men,
Mm,
and there was supposed to be either threats of or actual sexual violence against Swan,
yeah.
which Walter Hill has gone on record as saying he regrets taking that out from the script because he feels like it would
Okay.
have been progressive at the time,
Mm,
especially in a movie that contains F slurs, which, obviously is not ideal.
mm.
Um, but yeah, that was taken out. And apparently one of them was supposed to be Kevin Bacon.
Bloody hell.
But I did read that on IMDb, so take that with a grain of salt.
Oh, it's not true then.
But that would have been a whole year before, was it a year or 2 years before Friday the 13th?
Oh, was he in that?
So I do, yeah. So I
Okay.
find that curious.
I think I get why they didn't include that at the time because I feel like there would have probably been some nervousness about it. I would have enjoyed it being in the movie. Enjoy might be the wrong word to use, but one of the issues I have with this film is that I find it difficult to understand what the moral stance is of the film. Now, having researched it a little bit, I think I can see that, we're not meant to be thinking that any of these people are necessarily good. Whether you
Yeah.
root for some people or not is different. I don't think you're supposed to think any of them are good and decent people. But I feel like maybe something else, some other nuggets in there that would have made me understand the intention of the filmmakers a bit more might have given it a bit more weight to me, because I feel like having seen it the first time and then while I was watching it the second time before I did my research for the podcast, I was wondering what do we think about this? That we're using the F slurs, which obviously, as you said, is not ideal. What's the purpose of that? Are we saying that's bad? Is that just part of the lexicon then? Like I was struggling to understand what that was. So I think more meat on the bone would have been nice. This
I
movie is
think,
already dark as fuck. So I think,
yeah.
and it's weird because it's like really brightly coloured and camp and sort of whimsical in a way, but also really dark and gritty. So I think just leaning into that darkness a little bit more might have been a bit better for me.
I can appreciate that. I think personally, I'm not sure this film has any sort of moralistic agenda.
Okay.
I kind of see the film as being amoral, if
Mm,
anything. It's just sort of, it's taking a bit more of a neutral stance. And I think Walter Hill, from my research, seems to be somebody who's pretty economical with dialogue.
mm. Well, certainly
He's,
in a driver, there's
yeah.
hardly any dialogue in that.
Yeah. And I think I think he's a really good screenwriter
Mm.
in that his characters get a lot across without, saying relatively few words. And I think Ajax is a really good example of that. Um, he is openly homophobic. He's kind of, I want to say kind of, no, he is threatening sexual violence on the
Yeah.
undercover policewoman. He's the most openly violent. He really seems to struggle to keep those urges under control a lot of the time. He seems
Mm.
like pure id. He's a
Mm.
child. And I think those nuggets of dialogue are there to sort of signal that.
Yeah.
He's a walking red flag. So, while yes, that language is not great and it's definitely a product of its time,
Mm.
I understand why it's there. It tells us
Like,
everything about him.
well, like you've said, and we've discussed many, many times, like just because you portray something doesn't mean that you're endorsing that thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that it probably is more of just a showing you these characters rather than commenting on their actions. So that's an interesting point. But I think as I've mentioned before, I struggled with it because I didn't know what I was supposed to be feeling. I don't know if I missed something in the film. Like I said, having done more research, I think I can appreciate it a little bit more. But certainly on the first time viewing this, I was just cringing. I wanted to climb into my shoe with some of the things that they were saying to each other. The
Wow.
threats of
Okay.
sexual violence. I just was like,
Oh, yeah.
this is, I can't, why are we watching this? This is horrible. This is awful.
I actually do like quite a lot of the dialogue. Not that stuff that you've just mentioned, but from the opening frames, which were reshoots, by the way, they weren't intended. Like the opening shots were supposed to be at Coney Island during daylight.
Yeah,
But they felt that took something away, so those were reshoots.
I like that.
But yeah, me too. But from the opening frames, like the things that they're saying to each other and those kind of cutaways, it's almost like noir-esque dialogue, like very much. I don't know if gangs had their own kind of vernacular back then, and I'm struggling to think of any specific examples. But the words they use for like, are you carrying a gun, that kind of thing, it's all shorthand, it's slang almost. And I really, really love that.
Yeah.
It sort of cements this world that we're in.
Yeah. I'd agree with that, and I think that's probably the biggest compliment I can pay this film. I can pay this film. What you've just articulated is the world that's created in this. It feels kind of timeless. It's, as you said, the director's cut mentions that it's some time in the future, but that's still vague. But it feels like this almost alternative reality, and yeah, it's just a very unique looking film. And unlike anything else.
Which is why I've always been like, it gives me goosebumps every time I hear the word remake bandied about. Because you can't.
No.
I think this is the best example of a film that should never be remade, yeah. How could you?
I understand. I don't. I think if you're going to remake this movie, it needs to be like different, so you may as well just make a different movie. So actually one of the questions that I was going to ask you actually was along those lines, so I'll say this now: remake or legacy sequel? There has to be one. Which are you going with?
Oh god, legacy sequel.
Okay.
I guess like descendants of, I mean, you could make a film about the Warriors, because in terms of the costuming specifically, they were the most toned down, I guess. They were the most that looked like their back patch was almost reminiscent of like a biker gang, wasn't it? So they were the most real world, I guess.
Yeah.
But just don't do it. I remember first hearing about 15 years ago that they were trying to remake the film.
Yeah.
And I was kind of shocked, but I was like, okay, yeah, it's inevitable. This is just going to keep happening, isn't it? But then that fell through. And then I believe in 2016, the Russo brothers were trying to remake it into a TV show for Paramount.
The Russo brothers?
The Russo brothers, yeah.
Oh, God. Like, I like quite a lot of their output, more than most. I would say.
Yeah.
Even the stuff outside of the MCU. But the Russo brothers are the wrong choice for. Maybe they're just producers and they get someone else in. But oh Lord, no! I think that's the worst possible choice.
All right. So right back at you.
Yeah.
If we have to have a legacy sequel, who would you have direct it?
Ooh, well, bring back Walter Hill. He's still knocking about. Just give him the job again. Yeah, why not? Who else?
Well, I don't know. I was thinking
Paul
maybe
Verhoeven.
Oh no, Johnny, look. Oh no. I was thinking maybe somebody like a Nicholas Winding Refn.
That's a good choice.
He could do something really gritty, maybe.
Yeah, I like that idea. And he would want to do something different as well, I feel like.
Yeah. And it would look great and have very little dialogue.
Yeah.
Get Gosling.
All right, I'm in.
Yeah, that's all it took.
I heard, and I think this probably fits the property a bit more, but I heard that Lin-Manuel Miranda was going to do a musical version of it.
Are you joking?
No, no, I'm not.
Because that would make me so angry. Which
I think.
So basically, do you know why the book exists?
Because somebody wrote it.
Well, yeah.
Presumably.
Thank you. Thanks, Captain Obvious. So Sol Yurick wrote the book as kind of a knee-jerk response to like the romanticization of gangs in things like West Side Story.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So if we come full circle and make this a musical, that is absolutely spitting in the face of the novel.
That is missing the point, I guess.
Somewhat,
but I like
yeah.
that. I like that.
I hate it.
No, me, not a fan of musicals in the slightest, but I could see this being a musical. I can see it.
No.
And people fucking love, they go fucking apeshit for Hamilton. So I guess it would probably do quite well, and I understand he's quite a good writer, so I'm sure that he would do a good job. I wouldn't see it, but I think that fits the property more than a more modern remake or even legacy sequel, because it feels like this is.
Oh, hard disagree.
Okay.
Vehemently disagree with that point. I would much rather have like a gritty legacy sequel than a musical version. Ugh.
I think do the musical version, but like Starlight Express, put everyone on roller skates. Make the Dungaree Gang the only people not on roller skates.
Make the whole thing a musical, but instead of people, it's dogs.
Yeah, all right. Like that Jeff Goldblum movie.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
That's about as far removed from the original properties we can get.
All right, so we're going to do a completely different version of this. I think musical. You don't think musical. You think legacy sequel then?
If I had to choose one, yeah. If you made me.
Okay. Yeah.
Speaking of offshoots, though, did you ever play the Warriors video game on the PS2?
No, I had no idea it existed until I heard about it this morning.
Well, I own it.
Ooh.
So maybe I'll have to dig out the PS2 because it's genuinely a really good game.
Well, you mentioned earlier that the movie is kind of a computer game premise, and you've got to survive long enough to make it home. So I can see that working.
And there's a bunch of little side quests.
Yeah. Are we talking like a Streets of Rage type situation where you're just smashing bottles over people's heads?
Kind of, yeah. Like it's not a side scroller. It's a proper game, but yeah, Streets of Ragey. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. I'd play that.
Yeah,
I'd play that before I watch this movie again.
I think you'd like the video game a lot more than the movie.
I like getting paper cuts more than I like this movie. So.
Oh wow, God!
No, I'm joking. I think it's fine.
And
fine.
You liked the new Roadhouse.
No, don't.
This will never work.
Do not open that can of worms. Don't do it, because this is not a Roadhouse podcast.
But it could be.
We will cover it at some point.
So, going all the way back to cast again, there's one last person that I want to talk about, which sort of ties it into my favourite movie of all time, The Thing, because he was also in that. And that is Thomas G. Waits, who played Fox.
Okay.
Now, originally Fox was supposed to have a larger role. Originally, he was supposed to be Mercy's love interest, but apparently Thomas G. Waits had zero on-screen chemistry with Deborah. So they rewrote that to be Swan because they had really good chemistry.
Yeah.
Um, and Thomas G. Waits really, really butted heads with Walter Hill.
Okay.
And it's interesting, much like Near Dark that we covered last week, this film was also pretty much filmed chronologically, which kind of becomes obvious when Thomas G. Waits is written out halfway through.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was as a result of their constant arguments. They just couldn't agree on anything. They were like chalk and cheese, apparently. And Walter Hill regrets it to this day, he says. But he wrote that scene in which Fox and their policeman are kind of tussling on the platform, and then he gets thrown in front of a train
Right.
unceremoniously. So yeah, that was written in. He got a particularly violent death because he couldn't get on with the director.
Okay. Oh, so you've got links to a John Carpenter movie there.
Mm-hmm.
He was in The Thing.
Yeah, yeah. He didn't have a really good fate in that one either. He doesn't have much luck.
Does he die in that movie? No spoilers,
In The
actually.
Thing?
Yeah, I was joking.
Everyone dies in The Thing.
I was going to spoil The Thing.
Everybody dies. Well, not on screen, but yeah.
While we were watching this, I was thinking about another John Carpenter movie quite a bit, actually. Can you guess which one it was?
Escape from New York.
Of course it was.
Yeah, no, it gets compared to that quite a bit, I think.
I mean, it's the most obvious comparison I can think of. When we're doing these, I try to think of other films that are kind of like the ones that we're covering. Escape from New York popped into my head immediately, because obviously New York, it's set over...
Protagonist with the first name that's also an animal.
Snake and Swan. Swan Pliskin. Maybe they're brothers.
Maybe. Oh, that's canon now.
Yeah.
Swan Pliskin.
And I was also trying to think of other films that take place over like a night, over the course of one night. And I was thinking another film that you introduced me to actually not too long ago, Judgment Night.
Oh yeah.
Kind of similar in a way, like they've got to survive the night and trying to escape death or injury, I guess.
Denis Leary.
Oh God, yeah, I forgot. we should, if anyone sees Denis Leary, they should run away immediately. Even
Seems like he's a little bit hot-headed.
Oh yeah, God, I can't stand Denis Leary. Although I've got a lot of time for Suicide Kings.
You and nobody else.
Yeah, me and Johnny Galecki. I think that's it. I was also thinking
Johnny Galecki's not thinking about Suicide Kings.
I suppose
he's
not.
Going to bed swimming in all that Big Bang Theory money like Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah, he's just got like a massive drum full of coins, and he dives into it, swims around in it. Yeah. God, Big Bang Theory money. God, why did that show make so much money? It was terrible.
People are idiots.
Sorry,
to quote Superhands, people like Coldplay voted for the Nazis. You can't trust people.
Look, you like who you like. If you like that show, that's fair enough. I'm not going to be as harsh as Sarah is. But it does nothing for me. It's not even like a Hangover type thing. Where it's anyway, we're going way off topic here.
We could be here for a while, slacking off Big Bang Theory.
Other films that take place over the course of an evening, The Purge. I think The Purge owes quite a lot to the Warriors. Obviously, you've got the different kind of...
especially The Purge 2.
Yes. Obviously, you've got the super stylized costumes and the different kind of factions and the way that people represent themselves. I think that owes a lot to the Warriors.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Halloween. That's one night, I think, isn't it? The original Halloween. It's been a long time.
Halloween came before.
Halloween did come before. Yeah.
That was 78.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure. Also influenced by the Warriors. He's wearing a mask.
Yeah. There's no William Shatner gang in the Warriors, sadly.
There should have been. Oh my God. Just 9 people all with the same white Shatner mask on. Brilliant.
Yeah. I was thinking more along the lines of just other movies that take place over the course of kind of one night. Panic Room is another one.
Mm.
But thankfully, there's no Jared Leto gang in The Warriors. That might be my favourite Jared Leto movie, actually, if I have to have one.
Panic Room.
Yeah. In terms of like
Yeah.
where he's like second lead.
That's Fincher, isn't it?
Yeah. I think Fight
I
Club.
like Panic Room.
I think Fight Club is my favourite movie that Jared Leto is in, but he's in it for like 2 scenes. So, yeah. Anyway, this is not the Jared Leto podcast, thankfully.
We'd both go mad very quickly if it was.
Yeah. We start sending each other dead rats and condoms in the post, which is weird because we live together.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah.
So before we start wrapping up, I want to talk a little bit more about the female characters in this, because of course I do. Obviously, this film is not exactly a case study in the divisions of gender or anything like that. I'm not going to get too deep into it. But how do you feel about it in terms of, in the frame of like the Lizzies and Mercy being the only real notable female characters, besides the radio announcer, obviously?
Yeah, that's interesting. I obviously you've got the radio announcer. I enjoyed the Lizzie gang. I think they're good, and I like Mercy's character. I think for the time, I think it was probably quite good. I think now you'd probably have and hopefully you would have a bit more female, a few more stronger female characters, maybe.
I'm not sure that you would.
Okay, I would hope that you would, but maybe, like you say, wouldn't necessarily be the case. But I think that they're good and they're interesting characters. I think I quite enjoyed all of the female characters in this, even though the Lizzies are not in it that much. I would have enjoyed seeing a bit more of them.
Yeah, I quite enjoy the dichotomy of the Lizzies with Mercy's character, because they're so different. They're both obviously like a little bit hardened by what life's thrown at them or the paths that they've chosen. But I quite enjoy the Lizzies in that they're not dressed seductively at all, but they're very willing to sort of use their sexuality to their in their favor. And I quite like is it Rembrandt? I can't remember the actor's name. When they're at the Lizzie's kind of headquarters or whatever, and the rest of the warriors are just like, sure, yeah, we need to get somewhere, but women, which is insane given what's happened to them earlier in the night. And obviously Rembrandt is notable in that he's the only one who doesn't fall for it. Now, a lot of people have read into that the notion that Rembrandt might be gay, and that's why he doesn't fall for it, which apparently some of the people involved in the film have gone on record after the fact and said, yep, that's definitely it.
Yep.
But then the actor was openly gay.
That was my takeaway.
Was it?
When I was watching the movie, for sure. Yeah, I thought this character is a gay man. And I thought a lot of this movie is very, very gay. There's a lot... it's pretty obvious. I feel like I've already mentioned that I feel like Ajax is repressing something hugely because he's so openly homophobic, and usually is the case when someone's usually so homophobic, it means that there is some repressed feelings there, perhaps.
If you smelt it, you dealt it.
Yeah. and his use of the F slurs, which we've mentioned. There's an awful lot of talk about putting things in people's bottoms. There's honestly,
the bat line, the baseball bat line.
I'm gonna put that bat up your ass and turn you into a popsicle.
I love that line.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most memorable lines. There are 2 or 3 that are really memorable, but that one sticks with me. If you'll excuse the pun.
I won't.
But I think I assumed his character was gay, and I like that. I think that obviously we've already mentioned the leather daddies. There's lots. The rogues, they're called the leather daddies.
They do look a little bit like a low rent version of Judas Priest at times.
Yeah. There's so much dialogue of I'm gonna have your ass, or I'm on your ass. I'm staying on your ass. I didn't write anything down, but I was keeping a mental note. And there's 4 or 5 times when people say that. And I thought, we've mentioned how good a writer. That's ironic that I'm just messing up this thought entirely. But how good Walter Hill is at dialogue. I feel like that's definitely intentional. And I don't know. I feel like, I that was my feeling when I saw that character in there who seemed a bit out of place. It felt like he wasn't comfortable in that situation. Whether he felt like he was going to be judged for not doing the thing that everyone else was doing, I don't know. Whether that character is openly gay in that group, I don't know. He could be. But I feel like there's definitely something there.
Probably not with Ajax tossing around the F-slur all the time.
Yes, you're probably right. Yeah. And also I felt like towards the end of the movie where David Patrick Kelly is doing the infamous bottle on the fingers and he's saying, "Warriors, come out to play." I'd forgotten that he says it loads of times. I thought he just says it once. Yeah. And then he kept doing it, and
he gets increasingly unhinged every time he says it as well.
And his voice is getting more and more high pitched, and he seems like he's getting really like hot and flushed, and he's going really red. And I thought, it's all the poppers you're doing, isn't it? That's what that
is. Perfectly logical. Yeah. Just a quick aside, did you know that David Patrick Kelly improvised that completely?
I did. I listened to Walter Hill yesterday on Mark Maron podcast from about 6 or 7 years ago, which I'd really recommend. They had a really good chat and they spoke a lot about the Alien stuff and his career in general. So if you're at all interested, definitely listen to that. But yeah, he mentioned in that David Patrick Kelly kind of improvised that line, kind of went and picked up the bottles and just sort of did that, and it's become iconic. But it's really interesting because Walter Hill mentioned how good he is at writing character. I think he's also good at letting actors do their thing, and he describes that on that podcast as well. He said, sometimes you've just got to get out of their way. You are employing actors to be actors, and I feel like maybe we've discussed this before. You need something on the page so everyone understands what the intentions are for the scene, whether it's the crew, just from a practical perspective of the set design and stuff like that, and the things that are happening on screen that are going to speak to character. But I think if an actor, and I think we spoke about this with Chris on our The Way of the Gun episode, if an actor like Benicio del Toro can say something without dialogue and can do it with an action or something, then that's what actors are for. That's what they're paid all this, often, not sometimes, huge money. The majority of actors don't obviously earn big wedges of money, but that's what they're employed to do. They're employed to interpret what's written on the page and bring something to it. And I think that is probably one of the most successful parts of this movie is that line of dialogue. I think it's great.
It's so memorable.
It's ludicrous, but it fits the movie so well.
Yeah. It is ludicrous, but so's the film. Everything that came before it was ludicrous, so why not just ratchet that up to an 11 for the final showdown?
It's not like I'm watching this movie and going, "Oh yeah, this is plausible," and "Yeah, this seems like a real world," and then he does that and I go, "No, I'm out now. They've gone too far."
It does tickle me now because seeing him sat in the car doing that with the bottles, knowing after the fact that there were no seats in the hearse.
Oh no.
So he was just kind of perched on nothing. Makes it very funny.
I wonder what happened. Did Arnold come along and rip the seat out like he does in Commando?
I can only assume, yeah.
Which David Patrick Kelly is also in.
He is. Very small man in a very large suit.
Yeah. Yeah. Terrible suit choice.
It was the 80s.
He's so good at playing a scumbag. I'm like, why didn't we see more of him? I would love to have seen more of him.
I don't know. I didn't see him in anything for ages until we watched VFW.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And that movie's kind of feels like a bit of a love letter to other movies. So it's a bit of a stunt casting in a way, I guess. But I think he's great
Yeah.
in this, and I think he's great in Commando. He's very good at playing that scumbag character. Like, I hate him in both movies, but you're
Yeah.
supposed to. And
Absolutely.
in a film where I hate pretty much everybody, and he stands out as kind of the worst, I think that's a success. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't really talked very much about Luther until now because
No,
obviously he is the he
he's the inciting. He's
I was
the inciting.
I was literally
person.
trying to figure out how to say he does the inciting incident, but I couldn't figure out how to word it. And you also couldn't figure out how to word it. So we're a disaster. Yeah, but he's the one who shoots Cyrus
Yeah,
and pins it on the warriors. So everything is his doing.
yeah.
And we even get to know his motivations other than he's a little chaos goblin.
Well, he says that, doesn't he? He says, I just do these things because it's fun.
Yeah, he's just the intrusive thoughts personified.
Yeah, he's a 13-year-old boy.
Yeah,
as we mentioned, he's done the big thing, and he's gotten the magic coin in the thing.
I think that
Yeah,
there's one scene that really exemplifies how much of a 13-year-old boy Luther is, and that's when he's on the phone and some of the other rogues are like stealing from that kiosk
yeah.
and antagonizing the young girl behind the counter, and I can't remember what it is that he shouts when she says, are you going to pay for this stuff? And he's just insane. He's such a he's like evil Charlie Kelly.
That's a really good take. I really like that. Yeah, just stupid.
He's darkest timeline Charlie.
Yeah, just like running around like a dog.
Yeah,
chasing the car, but wouldn't know what to do with it if he caught it. Another Joker reference there for you. Yeah, that's a good shout. I like that. The one thing about his character, and it's not his fault or anything, but he sort of disappears for most of the movie, and I'd like to have seen more of him.
Okay.
I feel like he obviously is the reason that all of these events are happening, and then he sort of disappears for a little while. You see him pop up at the kiosk, and then he shouts something that you can't understand. And I was also trying to figure out what it. I think he says something like, because she says, the kiosk lady says, "Are you going to pay for that?" And I think he says, "Pay for what?"
Yeah.
And I think he said, "Pay for what?" But I wouldn't bet my house on it.
No.
But yeah, he disappears for a little while, and then he comes back at the end where he's doing the bottle thing. Which, by the way, I don't know about American bottles, but in England you can't fit your fingers into bottles, unfortunately. Lord knows I've tried.
Maybe you've just got really big fingers.
I don't know. That's the thing. I've got tiny hands. Yeah, but I like it when he reappears and he utters that infamous line more times than I thought that he did originally.
It was
and
also
to know that
we've talked about it being improvised already, but he kind of stole it from an incident that happened when he was a lot younger, because it was very similar to something one of his creepy neighbors used to do out front of the house.
Good Lord.
Yeah. So maybe
Wow.
not as ludicrous as you think.
No, that's so interesting. He yeah, just so we're getting towards the end of the film now, or we are at the end of the film, and I think Ajax notices that he's being followed by Luther, and he leads him onto the beach, and then that's when the very last kind of thing happens where Luther pulls out the gun, and Ajax like dodges.
Swan.
Sorry, Swan. Yeah, I've just been calling him Ajax.
Don't you do my boy dirty like
I'm
that.
sorry, I've been calling him Ajax, but let's be honest, they're all bare names. So Luther fires the gun, and then Swan dodges the gun, and I thought, someone's been shot here.
Whoever was stood to your left, they're toast now.
Yeah, I thought genuinely, I think I misremembered it. I thought someone caught a slug in that scene, but obviously not. But he dodges him, throws a knife into his wrist. What a great knife thrower. He should be in the circus. Why is he running around in gangs? He's like the most talented knife thrower of all time. And also, I don't know if you noticed anywhere, but Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller was credited in this movie as knife thrower.
Seriously?
Yeah, so I'm guessing that he must have done that. Must have thrown the knife.
What? Wait, what?
Yeah, yeah,
How did that pass me by? For
yeah,
real?
for real, for real. I don't know where I saw that, but I saw it somewhere, and I googled it just to make sure it wasn't some kind of fever dream I'd had. And there was a tweet from Penn about 7 years ago or a decade ago saying, yes, I was credited as knife thrower on that movie, and it's very, very hard to throw that kind of knife. And then I immediately thought to myself, oh,
Wow.
if Penn was in it, why didn't we also cast Teller as one of the mimes?
Maybe they did.
Or we could have done some kind of magic gang. There could have been like people that are like, oh, how are you gonna kill me? I'm gonna pretend to saw you in half.
Yeah, the magicians. There you go.
Yeah,
That's no weirder than some of the
yeah.
names. I like it. Yeah, and then Swan and Mercy walk off into the sunset and live happily ever after.
You would assume so, yeah. Well, I guess we'll find out in the Legacy sequel. The child of Swan and
No.
Mercy.
Oh, it would as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So, your opinion hasn't changed.
No, not a great deal. I think I definitely don't love this movie. I didn't like it very much the first time I saw it. I have more of an appreciation for it now, having thought about it a bit more. I think it's fine. Um, I think it works mostly as a film to kind of have on in the background at a party and put it on mute.
Really?
I think
You would
so.
put this on mute?
I absolutely
Oh,
would put this on mute in a heartbeat.
I'm sorry, I can't get past that. You would put this on mute.
Yeah, I
But
think
like,
the most,
oh,
outside of a couple of memorable lines, I think the most interesting thing about this is the way that it looks. I think it looks great. I think the use of locations is brilliant. I think it's well directed.
I really like the original music, including the song right at the end. In fact, I can't believe you would mute this. I was annoyed when Now TV did the 3, 2, 1 previews coming up and cut away from the song over the credits. I had
Oh,
to
okay.
exit back out so I could continue listening to the song.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
I think the most interesting thing about this movie is the way that it looks. Aside from some key bits of dialogue that are very notable or very, very memorable rather, and one or two songs which I quite like, which was obviously Nowhere to Run, heavily homaged in John Wick Chapter 4 with the DJ.
Yes. Yeah.
I enjoy that song a lot, but yes, unfortunately, as upsetting as it is to you, I would choose to put this on mute.
Okay. Well, I agree with your assessment that it looks great. We agree on that point at the very least. Um, I think everything was shot on location, which is interesting and unusual.
Yeah.
I think everything with the exception of the men's bathroom fight, which was a set. Everything else was shot on location. It was shot in 60 days.
Mm.
For all intents and purposes, it sounds like they had a hell of a time even filming it because
I'm
that like
not surprised.
that obviously there were a lot of real gangs in the areas that they were filming. They were annoyed that none of them had been cast. So they kind of caused chaos for them. It was like pandemonium sometimes. They had to keep moving location because they would just get harassed.
Mm.
They had to keep redoing shots because people were shouting off screen. There was one incident where one gang kind of broke onto set and stole or trashed thousands of dollars worth of equipment. It sounded like a real effort to even get this film made.
Yeah.
So I think what they did was outstanding, especially in the face of all that.
Yeah, it's definitely an impressive achievement. I did get the feeling that it would have been a hard shoot. I think any features or anything is so hard to make. But I thought that in that scene where they having a gang meeting and there's 1,000 extras sitting in one location, I thought just the coordination of that. The first AD must have
Yeah.
been awake for 3 weeks trying to plan that and just on that tannoy constantly.
And like the changes that were made on the fly as well, because it was such a problematic filming, things like having to write out Thomas G. Waits halfway through to the point where he demanded that he wasn't even credited.
Mm.
The scene kind of surrounding that where Mercy's running with his double And during one of those scenes, she fell and he wouldn't let go of her hand, so she fell really awkwardly and broke her wrist. So they had to write into the script why she's now wearing a jacket that's covering a cast on her wrist.
Oh, right.
Like, there's so much stuff that they had to do on the fly.
Yeah.
So I think there's just so many reasons that I admire this film.
Yeah, there's a lot to appreciate about it for sure, and it must have been a really difficult shoot for all of the reasons that you've mentioned. But even if those things hadn't have happened, just to shoot on location overnight, I thought that it's such a well lit movie for something that's shot almost entirely outside at night. I thought it looked great. If this was shot today, you wouldn't be able to see anything. Yeah, it looks great. Not quite for me. But I can, if I'd have seen it when I was a kid, I might feel quite differently about this, I would say.
Okay. That's very diplomatic of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you know me.
Mr. Diplomacy. Yeah, I mean, my opinion is also unchanged. This is still in my top 10. I do still struggle to articulate exactly why, because there is so much about it that's problematic. There's so much about it that's imperfect, but I think the acting's great for the most part. I think the dialogue, the casting, the cinematography, the soundtrack, I love it.
Yeah.
I really love it. The lean running time.
Yeah.
It all works for me.
There's a lot. I can see why someone might enjoy this and might quite like it. It's just missing something for me, and I think that's narratively. I think that's something to latch onto, whether that's a character arc, a character to root for, or a reason. I feel like I've said it already, but I appreciate it more now that I've done some more research on it. But I feel like you shouldn't
That's often
need
the case, isn't it?
Yes. But I feel like you shouldn't need to.
Yeah.
You should be able to watch a movie and kind of get it from the film. And that's not necessarily
I can appreciate that.
a criticism on the movie. That could just be me that missed a bunch of stuff, but that's my thoughts and feelings on it. It's all right.
No, that's completely understandable. And kind of further to that point, I guess the people that I latch onto and root for are Swan and Mercy.
Yeah.
Still a better love story than Twilight.
Yes. Yeah. Right. So this is our penultimate episode of the season. So next week, last episode of my neo-western season, and another movie that's not a neo-western. But I'm so excited because it's our first John Carpenter movie.
How have we managed to make it to season 5?
I know, episode 40, and it's our first John Carpenter movie. Certainly won't be our last.
No way.
But we're covering Big Trouble in Little China, which I couldn't be more excited for. I love this movie. We'll get into it next week.
Yep.